Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Dogboat333, and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4, The New Order, Last Days of Europe, as the Greater German Reich. Talk about greater goddamn. In the last video, we finished up our last moves against Himmler. We destroyed Burgundy, and we've won the day. We have control of the nuclear stockpiles. Heinrich Himmler is dead. Ding dong, the wicked bitch is dead. Yeah, there's not much else to do other than just kind of sit back and watch what happens. It was done. Heydrich almost couldn't believe it. The invincible shadow state, laid low by a coalition of the willing, and it had been he who led them to victory. He, Reinhard Heydrich, the butcher of Prague, the blonde beast, the man with the iron heart, whom nobody ever expected to rule. Yet rule he did, from the Ostparis to Galicia, from Schleswig-Holstein to the Alps. It was his. That was what they claimed in taverns and SS barracks across the Reich, and it was what the new map in his office affirmed, but he knew it wasn't so. Loyalty was a dead concept. Nobody served in his coalition was loyal to him personally, as they would have been to Hitler. Nobody really wanted him to rule, even after defeating Himmler. Those who had the decency to serve the Reich, rather than themselves, were dead or scattered to the winds of his hand, thanks to his past servitude to Himmler. He thought of Speer, and the paternal love Hitler had borne him, or Bormann, his mastery of politics, or of Göring, and his unwavering popularity. He could not command anything so useful or admirable. Hitler liked him for his ruthlessness, but it was that very trait which had led him to Himmler's clutches. If he'd just picked a side earlier, spread himself in the Reich all those years of disgrace and turmoil. It all came down to him. His indecision. His weakness. His mistakes. And now all the good left in him had been forsaken in the name of destroying Himmler. Loyalty, honor, principle, all sacrificed on the altar of victory. He could only stare out across the rebuilding cityscape of Germania, as hope and pride continued to drain from his soul, pouring out into the night sky. He was empty. Silke and Marta had never been inside the Führer's office, not even when Heydrich had brought them to Berlin as children. Hitler had only ever been mentally brief at Berchtesgaden, and once at their estate after Klaus died. Now there they sat, daughters of the Führer, the most powerful man on earth. Yet, it had been a disappointing trip, always distant yet overbearing. Now, their father wanted to see them? He hadn't been so interested when they needed his investment the most. Silke. Marta, he said, breaking several minutes' silence. He was uncharacteristically soft-spoken all of a sudden. I know the circumstances of the nation have not always permitted it, but I hope you are both aware of how much I care for you both. Now that the traitors are defeated, you can look forward to rich and happy lives. Yes, father, muttered Marta, deferential as ever. Silke was less so. We have rich and happy lives already. No thanks to you. We're grown women, not little girls. Don't talk to us like that, if you please. For a moment it looked as though Heydrich might rise from his desk and say something vicious, but instead his shoulders just slumped. For a moment he looked slightly confused, or perhaps sad. It was hard to tell, but certainly was certainly an expression his daughters couldn't remember seeing on their father's face at any point. Sorry, he finally mumbled. He looked away out the window. I'm sure you understand how parents must feel. Now, as to the future. When are you going to do something about our damned rights? Demanded Silke. Speerslot was right. Maybe Edith Göring was happy with servitude. But we're not. Heydrich frowned. You know those ideas are not permissible. Speaking as your father and fear both, I must maintain the ideal of... Silka stood without a word and departed before he could finish. With an apologetic glance, Marta followed, leaving Heydrich alone in his office once more. Where did I go wrong? Heydrich heard someone pick up the receiver on the other end of the line at long last. It had been too long since he'd spoken to Haida, a mistake he would rectify now. As his son and heir, it was only right that Haida finally began to assume both honors and burdens befitting his status, like Josias' son Wittekind. Now there was a fine example. A little politically disengaged, perhaps, but an admirable young Aryan nonetheless. Heydrich residence, came a weary voice from the receiver. Haida, my boy. Heydrich put on his best fatherly airs. Good mo... No hesitation. Dejected, Heydrich dropped the receiver back onto its hook, resisting the sudden urge to fling it against the wall. Stupid boy, stubborn as ever. Still clinging to the ideas his father had fought so hard to extinguish in the Civil War. Maybe a term in the... The thought froze midway through formation. What was he thinking? Haida was his blood, his progeny. Blood was what mattered above all. It defined race, nation, and heritage. Without ties of blood, what more was there? But still, Haida was his child, deserving of discipline. So what if he resented his father? He had to learn, like any others, or recalcitrant children. That was the ideal which Himmler's ideals. Not his. Not Germany's. Himmler's. Words and thoughts of a traitor. An uncomfortable thought began to dawn on Heydrich as a cold sensation spread down his spine. No. No, no, no. Lena's hair was graying like her husband's, but he still remained enraptured by her beauty. They reclined together on a couch in the Führer's private lounge in the Reich chancellery, quietly conversing of the sunset on Germania. It doesn't feel right, you know, Lena murmured, looking at Heydrich from her place in his arms. All this chaos is finally over. You'll finally have the good days back, Reinhard. Heydrich just continued to stare over her, out the window. Reinhard, are you listening? He shook himself out of his reverie and looked down into his wife's eyes, slightly dazed. Sorry, Lena, I was... Well, yes. You're right. It doesn't feel real. I never thought it would end how it did, having to fight my brothers in another damned war. And now I can make Germany into what it always should be, she replied with a smile. All those ideas you've been dwelling on, trying to get people to listen to you for years, you can make them a law now. You could do anything you wanted. None of that... No more of that pig Martin Bormann steering things down the road. Huh? I'll miss the servants, though. Slaves. Yes, whatever you call them. It was so convenient, especially when we got rid of the Jews and took Jehovah's Witnesses instead. I felt so much safer with them around. Never would have liked our boys growing up with those dark-eyed vermins. Heydrich had thought, many, many thoughts, but kept them to himself. No sense of bothering Lena with uncertainties now. Let her enjoy the comfort of a self-assured life. She would need the memories on darker days. Glancing down at her relaxed face, soft features concealed venom and honey alike. He ran his fingers through her graying hair and whispered gently, I love you, Lena. Klaus Heydrich, 1933 to 1943, beloved son of Reinhard and Lena Heydrich, brother of Silke, Haida, and Marta Heydrich. Rest in peace. Klaus hadn't died because of the Jews, Heydrich thought as he knelt before his son's grave, the cold drizzle slowly dampening his SS uniform. He hadn't died because of Bolshevism. He died because he was a child who didn't understand safety. He died because he rode his bicycle onto the road too quickly for the truck driver, a German, Aryan truck driver, to stop in time. At the time, Heydrich had still been Reich protector, working overtime in Prague to make sure there was nothing left of Czech resistance. What if he'd been there? It seemed to him that the family, first and foremost duty of the Aryan man, was to protect his family. At least that was the most important traditional value, surely was. One's bloodline was the basis of race and its continuation, wasn't it? Instead, he'd been far away, forcing Himmler's orders by ensuring the total destruction of a Czech national consciousness. Was that the right thing to do at the time? He hadn't really thought about it. In hindsight, that would depend on how compromised Himmler's vision had been. If he'd been disloyal to Hitler even then. Heydrich shivered and drew his coat tight around him. The thought was unbearable. Pushing it aside, he tried his best to think only of his son, the 10 happy years he'd been able to give him. He did not succeed. The list Heydrich had requested sat on his desk in a neat stack. The size alone had been enough for him to never even bother looking at them. It was enough in an answer to his question. Too many was the answer. Too many dead Germans, dead Aryans, dead by his orders. Men, women, children, his enemies and their families alike. The Jews hadn't done that. He had. The question had been answered, but the rate at which his own people slaughtered each other had only increased. What did that imply? Heydrich didn't want to know, but there was no escaping it. Empirically, much of what was once certain in the world was certainly no longer. Two of the most devastating conflicts in Germany's history had been caused by Aryan hands, Aryan minds, and Aryan politicking. The Führer suddenly shut upright at the thought. Was electrified. No, no, no. That would be the end of it. The end of it all. Nothing would matter anymore after that. Everything would have been tried and failed. If it was an error. No. Not an error. Not a mistake. A lie. What's next then? Heydrich was silent for a long moment. I'm not sure, Gela, he replied. The situation is tenuous. Victory's euphoria will burn out soon. Beyond that, Gela chuckled from whatever he was speaking. Heydrich could hear cheering and an SS song being roared out in the background. Beyond that, my fear, we shall do what we must, as we always have. What's one more civil war? It's all for good cause in the end. If the last war wasn't enough to cow the traitors once and for all, we can try again. It's never failed us before. Hasn't it? Heydrich's voice took on a bitter tone. Wouldn't it have been better if Aryans didn't shed each other's blood twice over already? If we just what, my fear? Asked Gela, with an unpleasant chill to his voice. Just talked? That was never going to happen. Blood and iron. That is our way. The destiny of the German race is forged in the fires of war and nothing else. Nowhere else. Whether it takes one or 1,000, we'll never change that, God willing. Heydrich couldn't muster another response. Blood and iron. That was right, wasn't it? The last empire hadn't been crafted by a diplomat, but by soldiers in their empire. Their emperor. 40 years of glory of hegemony over Central Europe. And then it had come crashing down. Then, yet again, with Hitler's Reich. What of Heydrich's Reich? Was that too doomed to mere decades of existence before another bloody twilight fell upon it? He dropped the voice and slumped back into his chair, ignoring Gela's tiny voice coming from a dangling receiver. If this is what it was all for, then I fear the future. The combat reports spoke for themselves. It wasn't right. Gela protested, tried to cover it up. Even now, with Himmler gone, his influence in the culture of deception remained. The subhumans had made victory certain. On a dozen battlefields, it was they who carried the day. Daring assaults that not even the most fanatical of the Burgundian SS would have attempted. Astounding acts of self-sacrifice, a talent for asymmetrical warfare and toe-to-toe fighting that matched the best of it here. Not even an excuse of being under SS command was applicable. Slavs, Balts, and even some Jews was damned as inferiors by Heydrich, and so many others, were the ones to whom he owed victory. The meaning of that fact was all too clear. Heydrich had known it to be a betrayal when he made the choice to ally with them. It was a betrayal of National Socialism, to suppose there was any value in the life and capabilities of a subhuman, but it in turn had betrayed him. For years, he had known, not supposed, known, that those people were in fact objectively inferior. He had trusted in that, seen it demonstrated him again and again in how easy their forces were crushed by the fatherland's own. But now he owed them victory? What, was it a joke? Some conspiracy of fate? If one fact was thrown into doubt, what of those it provided the foundations for? Heydrich begged and pleaded and even wept in the darkness of his office, but the truth obliterated all barriers. It can't be. It can't be. For the first time in a long, long time, Heydrich was drunk. He'd finally opened the cognac sent as a gift by some ignoramus in the Waffen-SS, unaware of the Führer's standards, and hadn't put the bottle down in 6 hours. Lena, he slurred, slumped over his desk. Lena, I've made so many. God, just... Throwing himself back into his chair, he raised the bottle and guzzled down another mouthful, ignoring the alcohol that dribbled down his collar and onto his unkempt uniform. As it finally ran empty, he let it drop to the floor, where it clinked loudly on the tiles, before roaring out of sight. Fuck, he gurgled. Fucking Himmler. Fuck! There was a moment's pause, and then some turmoil within him. Heydrich had about 2 seconds notice before he vomited loudly and painfully, doubling over and splattering bile and alcohol all over his desk, the floor, and his trousers. He slumped back, too exhausted and apathetic to do anything about it. He passed out thinking of what might have been, of the naval life, of the life in the Luftwaffe, a world where he rejected Lena's notion of working for a new upstart political party, of a peaceful retirement that could have been taken years ago, or for the better world that might have come if he just shot Himmler for the coup attempt over a decade ago. When he woke, it was from a distorted torrent of nightmares and could-have-beens. He dragged himself to the bathroom to stand, filthy and shameful, before the mirror. Staring back at him, he saw Reinhard Heydrich for what he truly was, the last traitor. Dearest Lena, by the time you read this, it will have become very clear to you that the Reich you knew is no more. The very tenets of National Socialism upon which our nation is built have failed us. There's only one more barrier preventing this truth from becoming known to all, and I intend to remove it. It will not be an easy thing for you to bear, but I implore you to forge ahead regardless of how difficult life becomes. Our children will stand with you. Of this I am certain. Now all that else is uncertain. Family is all that we have left. Arrangements were made in the past for an occasion such as this, though the exact circumstances that have led to it were not something I could have foreseen. No matter what happens, you and our children will be safe. I swear on what little remains of my honor. You will not want for money, security, or sustenance. Ensure that our children receive this message. I especially wish for you to pass my unconditional love to Haida, whom I have failed more profoundly than any other. Just think always of Klaus, taken from us because I was not there to protect him. There's one more thing, which I express here to you alone. Himmler was not the true traitor. I am. Himmler betrayed us all, and would have damned the world for the hell of nuclear Armageddon, but my betrayal runs far deeper. For by waging war of civil war upon fellow Germans, I have exposed the futility and failures of all that Hitler built. Had I chosen ignorance, I might have avoided this, but I could not do so. All I ever wanted was to serve faithfully, but that which I was loyal to is a house of mirrors built upon sand. Tell our children that I love them, and that their father died doing the right thing. Now and forever, Lena. I love you. Heydrich set his pen aside and exhaled slowly as his hand moved to the polished Luger before him. There was only one more mistake to correct, and then God's tune would come to an end. Auf Wiedersehen.